I don't think everybody knows how much you have done in theatre in South Africa. And just one thing I'd like to start with, something that a lot of people don't know, is that you've had 2 command performances from the royal family. Tell us about that.
Okay, I've had more than that, but I've had, well, because our environmental work was a great interest to the Duke of Edinburgh, and I performed for him a couple of times in really sort of big occasions, like the opening of a big conference or a world event. And they loved our animal work, which was sort of popular here, but it was hugely successful abroad. And so I got to know him, and then he asked me, would I come and perform for his family, which was in the last days of sort of Lady Di and the one, I can never remember the one who sucked somebody's toe, but it was in that sort of era, and we playing Edinburgh Festival, and then we were sent for in a guard's van, which is like a combi with a hell of a high roof, so that the busbies don't bang on the roof, and we went off to Balmoral, and they looked after us and fed us and loved us, and we met this huge family because they were multiplying at that time. Edward was girlfriending, but Charles and Andrew were, sort of families, and the Queen Mum was still alive, and we performed in Balmoral in the ballroom, and it was huge fun. I can remember little William and Harry sort of sitting on the floor, and Charles was amazing. He knew all the animals before, because you do these animals, and some of them are quite obscure. And it was a wonderful time. And then we were invited for the Duke's 85th birthday. We've just had that sort of luck, really. They are fun to perform to because they're much more fun away from their royal duties than they are. And like Charles knows a hell of a lot about Africa. And he's such a wally, so you sort of try to equate these 2 human beings. Yeah, I know, that was a great privilege. Yeah, lovely. And then, of course, we did stuff here in Africa that they, well, certainly Andrew and Charles and Prince Philip have come out here quite regularly.
And made contact with you in South Africa?
Yeah, it's very easy to contact the royal family. You just write to Buckingham Palace and you don't put anything else on the envelope and they answer you. So if they want to get in touch with you, they just command, I suppose, and some poor empire builder who's now out of work has to sort of try and find you wherever you are. I went to the kind of school in Bulawayo where the school plays paid for the new rugby fields. And so the school plays got a lot of attention. And so I was lucky. I did like 2 a year, yeah, very lucky. And then there was a theatre club, still there in Bulawayo. And if they thought you were good, they asked you to join the sort of adult things to play the young parts. And then, best of all, Brian Brook used to tour, and Oliver came to town, and they recruited us to be in Oliver because they weren't allowed to tour the kids. So yes, I've been acting since the early 60s. Yeah, but I mean, it's a big step up when you start working with full company of pros, Oof.
So did you know from an early age you wanted to be an actor, or was it Brian Brook who swayed you?
Brian Brook, I think, nearly put me off acting. Spent a lot of time flirting with girls. I wanted to be an actor because I enjoyed it, but I never thought you could make a living out of it. But my mum was a wise woman, and she encouraged me. We were a musical family, all played instruments, and I think my mum could see further ahead than I could. I went to university, studied economics, but then switched, and so my BA was economics, but my passion was theatre. I did know early, from about 16, I think. I liked acting. I could get lost, have a lot of fun. Yeah, I did like acting.
You've done a lot of Shakespeare's in character roles.
I think I've only done 15, so I don't know if that's a lot. What I do know is it gets harder and harder. Yeah, I've done a lot of Shakespeare, and I've had nice roles. And Shakespeare is a great basis, you know, and I love it. Shakespeare is fun. Just another language.
The World Creativity Symposium in Zermatt.
Oh.
Tell us about that.
That's a real odd event, isn't it? I mean, they choose 5, they call them sort of wise men or something from around the world, and then you go and do your bit. I had Wally Silyenke in that little group that I was in, and he is quite a wise man. Pity he didn't write more plays and spend less time in politics, but yeah, it's one of these sort of funded events, and you don't know who the funder is, and they spoil the hell out of you, and you know, they give you medals and things, but you wonder what it's all about.
For
really.
what particular play or...
We took, I think, Horn of Sorrow there, and it was great fun because, you know, we used to sort of touring Africa and performing under trees and things, and suddenly you're in these... It turned out that the place they put us was a Colombian drug lord's sort of hideaway, and it was this amazing sort of Swiss thing. And you know, everything in Zermatt goes up and down. There's no room to go out. So the actors, you know, all from Africa, a bit flabbergasted. You know, 2 stories up and they're getting vertigo, and here we are in this sort of up and down thing. It was wonderful. You know, those experiences in life are great fun. But I mean, I think the sort of giving of those sort of honours is all a bit dubious, you know. They really wanted the play, not me.
And even the World Bank President's Award?
I think we earned that. That was a really great time in our lives, and I'll tell you why. Because we were actually fighting for the right to trade ivory, a very contentious issue and a very critical African issue, because it's really at the center of all that is the right for African people to make their own decisions. And it's a very complex issue for the simple reason that Africa, we are rural, 60% plus in southern Africa. And then you get the situation where all their decisions are made in the city. And you know, it used to be by colonial folk, now it's by, you know, their own folk. So you have people who haven't a clue what's going on, then consulting with Geneva or Australia or somewhere to decide about an elephant that has just trampled your crops flat and you're facing starvation for the year. So I work a lot with those people with crops, and I spend a lot of time in those villages, and much as I think shooting elephants is ghastly, I'm afraid to them a good pair of tusks is school for the children, not for one person, for a village. You know, it's a massive deal. And yet we continue to dictate to these people who live with the problems. So we then set up this play, which was to try and prime CITES, which is the major decision-making world body. And it remains very powerful. And we pulled a little bit of a slippery on them. We performed through Europe. We won awards everywhere for theatre, not for wildlife. Edinburgh, we won the main award at Edinburgh with a thing called a Herald's Angel. And, you know, we went along, we performed in Trafalgar Square, Grand Place in Brussels, and all these sort of interesting places. And we built up a kind of following of African people living abroad. And ultimately, you get to Montreal, we performed there, the vote went in our favor. And Southern Africa were allowed to continue to trade in controlled ivory, which is why we don't have the same problem as Kenya. It's much more contained here because it's legal. Anyway, now it's been lost again. But ultimately, the president, who was Bill Clinton at the time, said, I want to know about how this happened. How did you let that vote slip through? Well, it was on emotion. And it's on emotion that these things are always won. It's not facts that win these things. So theatre is a great tool. And then he asked us if we would perform it in Washington to his senior staff. They've got a theatre in the middle of the Capitol. I think it's called the Kennedy something or other. But anyway, we performed there. And just to the people who administer America. And it was amazing. So there's like over 1,000 people. They were sitting in the aisles, the whole tutti. So I think it sat 900 and they were just packed in. And then after, about a year later, they sent us an award and said, the work you're doing is really having an effect and all that, which is lovely when you're in the theatre. Because, you know, I still think, you know, we worry about the box office all the time, but these sort of things make a big difference to why we perform under trees a lot and work with people with no training and set up these kind of theatre happenings. It's because, you know, they're important. They're a communication tool that is critical.
One of those happenings was in Trafalgar Square. It's the first time anybody, let alone South Africans, have performed in Trafalgar Square.
Yeah, I think we took them by surprise a little bit. It wasn't a spontaneous event, it was planned. But when you have a few connections, you can slip these things through, you know. Trafalgar Square is part of that axis that is Buckingham Palace, Trafalgar Square, and yeah, we were able to perform there, and it was quite fun. I mean, the pigeon poo was unbearable because there's quite a lot of body work on the floor, and getting covered in bird poo is a bit smelly. No, it was huge. It was lovely. I think for me personally, it was about the sort of more the job creation side. I mean, I have won acting awards from Fleur de Cap, but they were in things like Shakespeare and that. But I think the other award really, reading the speech that didn't quite happen afterwards, the lady got stage fright. It's quite funny. Anyway, it was about creating jobs and making opportunity for lots of people over the years, and I think that's really what that was about.
Nicholas, you created Theatre for Africa and almost became Guardians of Eden, or you call yourself Guardians of Eden. Tell us about that.
I've created two great ensembles. The first was The Loft, which came out of Artscape. No, what were they called? NAPAC. I created The Loft, which came out of NAPAC, and it was a very powerful group of actors. Very, very, people like Madoda Nsinyan, Jabalan Chili, Bex Mkwani, Ellis Pearson, lovely Brett Greeley. They were just wonderful group of performers. But I became very anxious at that time about what was happening with government-funded money. And I felt we needed to go and learn about Africa. I felt we'd become more and more isolated. And it was apartheid years, and we just wouldn't release Mandela. So we were sort of stuck in a logjam at that time. And so Theatre for Africa was for us to go into Africa with and try and learn all these wonderful acting skills that are there in the rural theatre of Africa. And so Theatre for Africa was a sort of committed group of people. And we just literally, Liz and I, my beloved Liz, who's kind of held my hand through all these ridiculous things, we just literally got in cars and went and workshopped with communities, and hate that word, villages, and learned about how they mime, how they drum, how they dance, how they express themselves, but more importantly, what their anxieties were. What were they really, what was at their heart? Because you see, the NGO-ruled world, the money is raised to make a point. And of course, then you go to the community and say, okay, this is what we want you to arrive at. And you know, the wonderful giving nature of Africa is they say yes. And then it takes a lot of time and living and working with black people to actually, for them to free up what they really feel and think. And we wanted to give ourselves that time. And we were lucky, you know, we got funded eventually by World Bank, by different people. But it was always that crunch. Will you fund us to tell the truth, or have you got an agenda? And the fascinating thing is the people who were giving the money, they didn't have an agenda. And that includes people like America who are very agenda orientated. it was the people managing that money who had agendas. So often we found out things like the ownership of land. If you can put people in a community, then they can own land. They're now a viable force that we can deal with. They don't want that. They want to be individual farmers, like Peter Brody. They want to go and say, if I look after my crop of olives, I can pick them and I can get the money from selling them. But if the whole village is involved, that one's always drunk, that one's always fiddling with his motor car, I don't want to be their partners. And anyway, they won't invest anything. They just want the profit. So these are things NGOs do not like. So to create a theatre conduit was quite exciting because it was new information. It's still new information. The work that we were doing on rhino, on elephant, it's all hasn't changed enough. We still have an ANC government fiddling around, not sure whether they really think we should give communities power over their resources. All these things going on and on. Of course you should. I mean, they're the guardians, hence the Guardians of Eden. You know, we did a play called Guardians of Eden, which is about the right to manage our own resources.
You said that the way to communicate with Africa is by using the oldest technique that they know.
I still believe that. I think that we've lost 30, 40 years of work on behalf of rural communities by insisting on sending them pamphlets and posters and emails and all this bullshit. They don't have access to it. It doesn't reach them, actually. And when it does, it just goes on a classroom wall. It doesn't go into their thinking, their spirit. And yet, they're master communicators because they have no other entertainment. They love meeting in the evening, and you know, whether it's under the guise of the church or whether it's the Women's League or whatever. This all goes on under clubs in villages, literally from Tanzania to Cape Town. Changes a little bit north of there. And that's the place to put out debate. That's the place to learn and the place, I hate the word, to teach, to share. So I believe in it. I think theatre's the best. Unfortunately, malaria's out there and a few other nasties, but it's hard work. It's hard work. You can't do it don't do it from the offices of the Market Theatre or some bullshit like that. You've got to get out there. You've got to be in the field. You've got to be at the front, and you've got to take your time. You know, this whizzing and performing in a village and whizzing and doing another village, I did that for a while, and it was huge, and we playing to 2,000, 4,000, 5,000 people a day.
Just
but
give
there
us
was
a
no
picture of
impact.
that. Was it you and Liz and a couple
10
of other
actors.
actors? 10 actors?
One time 104. But the thing that's not really getting out in the conversation is that we all had skills. There are people like Andrew Buckland and that brought us new skills, and we used those skills. And we were adding our tuppence worth that we'd learned from the old fart theatre of my era. And everybody chipped in with what they had, musician. They were fantastic. So we lived long days, start very early in the morning, end very late at night, because we camped with these people. And so we could work for hours and fiddle and make things and do. And that really works in villages, that commitment. But this whizzing through and performing didn't really change anything, because we never learnt anything. We learned how to get ready for shows and then leap in the car and drive like hell around the lakes or into Tanzania or whatever. But it was the stopping and learning that had the impact, because what we were doing is creating lots of resource in people. So they were then able to carry on when we were gone. And that's, if you ask me today, the thing I'm most proud of in my life, it's counting the number of people who had nothing. They got no education, they got no government support, they got no opportunity until Theatre for Africa drove their way. And now the head of the Market Theatre, James Nkobo, I mean, I even look at people like Mark Lottering, and you know, I met Nick Rabinovitz on one of those tours, and I took him with me for, I don't know, a year or something. We traveled together, and I couldn't get Nick to come out and say what he felt, because he's an economist, Nick. And ultimately, he was storing it all up, and then when he let it out, he made a lot of sense. And that's how I think you do the most. I mean, I love seeing the Allen Committees of the world. He's very much an urban creature, although he tries to pretend he's a caveman. He wouldn't survive a day out in the sun unless there was cricket. But, you know, the invention and the sheer ability to stay there, big issue. And lots of these wonderful people. I mean, Madoda Nsinyan's now a major filmmaker. He doesn't use what we did then. What he does use is his ability to manage it. Nhlanhla Mavundla, now Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. I mean, he was an absolute down and out when we met him. Now he goes all over the world. He's a great performer, great theatre maker. That's how it is. And that's the thing I'm most excited by. How people go, you have a little influence and then they fly.